Phones are off, eh? Make sure your phones are off. Alrighty. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for popping in to the very first 2022 webinar for the United Aviation Group Derby. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're just going to give everybody a few minutes to join. Stefan, thank you for being with us all the way from Germany. I know you've been teaching the last 3 or 4 days, so we appreciate you rolling off the course and straight into this. And I know you've just come straight from teaching a lesson, so you've literally rolled straight out of the paddock and into this. So thank you so much as well for being here today. So we're still waiting for quite a few people to join, so we'll just give it another few minutes and then we will kick off. We are very chuffed to have Jonathan Welpe here as well. He is the CEO of United Aviation Group and the one who makes the United Derby happen for us. And we're very grateful to have him here and very grateful for all the time, effort, and financial assistance to make the United Derby a reality as well. So thank you, Jonathan, for being here as well today. Our creative director, Ingrid Ziegler, is also joining us. She will join us as a panelist now as well. So what I would like to just say is, as we are going, please feel free to put any questions you may have into the Q&A, and we will be bringing those questions into the actual sessions as we go. So please do feel free to drop your questions into there, and we will be asking those as we go. And then I think we're going to kick off in 2 seconds. Okay, so I think we're going to, as we start off, I think what better way to start than to look at a little bit of history with the Derby. The Derby courses have largely remained the same and largely are the same around the world. There are a couple of exceptions, a couple of things which are fairly unique to local personality with the Derby courses. For example, in Lumen, the Derby course, I believe, actually meanders out of the arena in 2 instances, which I find quite bizarre and very fascinating, and I really am keen to go and see that happen. They also, most of the fences, I believe, are the traditional white fences, which is also quite interesting. And I believe I want to say Falsterbo, a lot of the courses are very, very colorful, which is also quite a departure from Lumen, for example. What do you both think? And I think, Steph, let's start with you, Stefan. What do you think is the characteristic which very strongly defines the South African Derby as a unique personality?
Well, it always depends with the arena, and a Derby normally has a length between 1,000 meters and 1,300 meters, and you have to fit in a certain number of obstacles, and these obstacles, they have to be, well, they are consisting of natural obstacles, permanent obstacles, which you also have in Joburg, and you add also non-permanent obstacles, which have a little bit the characteristic to be more natural. That means that the poles maybe are more in these natural colors. There is not so much contrast, and it's normally not these colorful poles which we know from normal or standard shows.
Anna, do you have thoughts on that, on what makes these South African derbies so unique in comparison, especially to some of the other European derbies?
Philippa, I think each derby has its own, let's call it flavor, recipe, and they're all quite different. As you've said, there's La Ball, there's Falsterbo, Hickstead, Hamburg. We've got ours here, and it's a very traditional competition, the Derby. I love that. I love that most Derby tracks have stayed the same. The Hamburg Derby, I think, Stefan, you might correct me, but I think it's from 1926, the same course. And at Hamburg, when I assisted in the arena, I was amazed that none of the equipment has even really been modernized. In other words, the wall, which is the last fence at Hamburg, is in two enormous sections, the bottom and the top. And so if you hit the top one, nobody did, fortunately, you could take quite a toss, actually. In South Africa, we have modernized the equipment. And we've also, in South Africa, allow the course designer some leeway to adjust the dimensions and the width of the fences, and within a very sort of small domain, the location of some of the fences. So South African Derby is the same layout, the same track, but there are little things that can be different from year to year, although the look and feel is the same. I like the fact that derbies originate from the hunting and cross-country background, and usually it's undulating terrain. Here in Joburg, we really have a flat arena on 2 levels with some of the jumps going up and down. So it's not as much on undulating terrain as either Hickstead or Hamburg Derby, or our original Derby, which was designed at Inanda Club and was held there for some 35 or 40 years. We had to make a move out this way and have a multi-purpose arena. And a lot of our, let's call it our second Derby track, the one that's now at in the Bob Charter Arena at Kyalami Park, the feel of the track was similar to the original one, the order in which the fences came. Our Derby has quite a lot of oxes. The Hickstead Derby, for instance, only has 3 oxes in the entire course. So it's not all about the spreads. Ours has got a lot more spreads. Falsterbo, you said at Lumen they go out the arena. Falsterbo, they go out the arena over a road crossing, round the back of the grandstand, down into the arena again via the bank. So each is different.
I think it's in Falsterberg as well. There's the one jump, they literally jump. It feels like they're jumping through the crowd almost. The spectators are sitting right next to the one jump, and it's a very, very, very narrow upright. It's absolutely hair-raising. And they actually go out, they jump over, it's a white upright, and then they go over and they go out.
They go out, and then they go round the back of the grandstand, up a slope coming over the bank. At Hamburg, their fences up the one long side and the other with the spectators, which could be potentially very distracting for a lot of horses because they have enormous crowds. We only have the Devil's Dyke against the one side. Other than that, most of the fences are more inside of the arena. So they've all got their different challenges, I think.
Unique. So Stefan, this is obviously, as Anna touched on, this course has largely remained unchanged since the early 20s. I think the Hamburg celebrated their 92nd or 93rd course this year. What do you think makes this such an incredibly unique and incredibly challenging course for horse and riders? Is it just the distance? Is it just the size of the jumps? What makes this combination such a difficult, challenging course?
Well, first of all, you're right what you were saying. This course exists since the 1920s, and it hasn't changed since that time. We have it's not so much the distances in Hamburg. It's definitely the big bank where horses and riders have to be very brave to slide down, and then they have one stride over a big plank. And courses like this we would not design today, let's say in the standard classes, because they are going in one direction for a long time. Then you have maybe one change of the direction, one change of the rein, and then you finish over the rest of the entire course on the other rein. Today, let's say there is not so there are not so many technical questions. It is a little bit the jumping ability of the horse. There is, the horses and riders have to be brave to jump these obstacles. And some of the riders, they also do train these obstacles at home, because it's sometimes it's these are unusual obstacles to jump, which they normally don't find in any other arenas, or which they don't find also at other shows. So like the Big Bank in Hamburg, this is something where you really need a lot of confidence in your horse, and the horse has also to trust the rider. So this is for Hamburg, I think the Big Bank is one of the main criteria, and then the plank after. And of course, as Anne-Marie said, there are also not so many oxes in the course. There are only 3 oxes but therefore there are a lot of ditches and little water included. Also a big water is included, of course. And this makes the course unique. Well, as we said before, it hasn't changed since the 1920s. And also we see a lot of riders jumping these tracks who are from the region, who are from Hamburg region. And some of the top riders are not all going to the Hamburg Derby, but it's a very prestigious class, and whenever somebody has won the Hamburg Derby, I think this is a good reference in their own curriculum.
So tell me, you both show jumpers. You've both jumped the Derby in various forms. Do you think that being people who have had to jump this frankly terrifying course has given you both unique perspectives and a certain compassion for the riders? Do you think that you build differently because you've jumped the courses? I'm asking you both the question, but Stefan, let's stay with you first. I don't think you've, when I spoke to you about this the other day, you said you haven't jumped it quite at this level, but you've jumped, I think, the mini Derby.
Well, you have to, first of all, the horse must be brave. And because they have maybe to jump, or they have to glide down a bank, or they have to to jump on a table. And these distances are a little different to that what we normally have. And sometimes when you ride yourself these kind of obstacles, sometimes in the beginning you do not know exactly where is the correct point to take off, or how far, or with how much speed I have to go. But after, when you train this from time to time, then you get more confidence, and the horse also knows where to take off, and that nothing strange is going to happen. You also need a lot of condition, not only the horse, but also the rider, because when you are going in a normal course, you are going to jump 10, 12 obstacles, maybe 13. And in the Derby, you can easily jump 17, 18, 19 obstacles. So that means for the horse and the rider, you also have to be fit in order to start in these classes. Not that the gasoline is running out after number 11.
Anna, your thoughts? Do you think it makes you a more compassionate course builder, having jumped this so many times?
I don't know. I wouldn't say about compassionate, because you don't have the leeway to change too many things with the Derby. It is what it is, and it's a big, bold horse. And as Stefan said, you need a brave horse. I do think that the requisite practice and fitness and focus are important. And I mean, just speaking for myself, I started out life wanting to be a top event rider, and I fell into show jumping. I only started jumping in my 20s. And then I aspired to finish the Derby. That was my goal. And when eventually I saw the finish of the Derby, and in my first Derby got a ticket, that was probably the highlight of my career. I was very surprised that I won it the next time out. That was also very nice, but not quite as a good feeling of achievement as as my first round. When I got to the finish, I thought, that's it. I've seen the finish of the Derby, because I wasn't sure I could do it.
That's
and
the peak.
I was lucky I had a horse that had actually been around the Derby once before, and I knew he was super brave, and at the worst I might hit every pole, but I wasn't going to, he wasn't going to stop with me. Yeah, and I say for me, I've had really high success rate in the Derby because I've only made 11 starts in the Derby. You would think I'd made about 30 with all the years with my age, but producing horses, getting them ready, having a horse that is suited to the Derby, it's not for every horse, and I've made all my own horses. So so I'm very chuffed that I've won it twice out of 11 starts and had 3 good tickets as well. So I really rate the competition, and I like to think that I'll start preparing my horses at lower levels, because we're lucky enough to have Derby type shows offered, sometimes a pre-Derby show, and for us a post-Derby show where the course designers get to introduce the tests that will happen later in a friendly and easy way, so as to build up horses and riders for future Derbies. I think what happens in Europe a lot is the top riders are very busy with their major championships, global champions, and I don't know how much time. I think they go and practice a couple of times the Derby jumps, but I don't think every year they're doing the Derby practice on the side like we do generally in South Africa. They usually seem to come to the Derby with a horse that's already a little bit been there and done that, and then they give it a bit of a Derby school. Stefan, I don't know if you'd agree with me on that. Are you there, Stefan?
Stefan, I think you're frozen.
Here's a little frozen.
I couldn't hear you, the last sentence you said.
Yeah, what I said, Stefan, was I got the feeling, and I may be wrong, but I got the feeling that in Europe, often the top riders, if they want to do the Derby, they choose a horse from their string that is experienced, is brave, is mileage, and then they take it maybe 2-3 times to work over some Derby fences. Whereas here, if one has an ambition for Derby, one starts the horse probably in the 110 post Derby 1 year, the 120 the next year, the 130 the next year, the 140. And by the time our horses come to the big Derby, many of them have done smaller Derby tracks at least 3 or 4 times before. It's not suddenly out. I noticed that at Hamburg, when I went to help Frank Rottenberger, there were, I'd say, the bulk of the class, the horses looked very unsure at the Irish banks near the entrance. It looked like they were inexperienced in how to jump up, scramble over, get down. And I thought there were only about 5 out of the class that did it really well. And I thought those guys have been practicing enough. Maybe the others could have done with a little more practice. But I'm not sure if I'm correct in that, Stefan.
Yeah. Well, let's say the riders are picking a horse which is maybe not their normally not their Grand Prix horse, because as you said, there are a lot of other shows where riders have the possibility to go at whatever is the level, 4-star, 5-star. There are plenty of shows, so they choose a specific horse in order to jump this class. And yeah, you are right, especially when it comes to natural obstacles. You see the difference, who has trained or who had the possibility to train the horse, and who is a little bit more unexperienced. I think the Irish banks, they are a good example for it.
So, and I would like to ask you, I think my next question then, international versus the local show jumpers. Are there any specific or unique challenges faced by our local riders, or are the challenges faced on this Derby course specific? I mean, are they universal challenges? Is there anything specific or different for our riders, or do you think that, the Derby course is the Derby course and it's just hard for everybody?
I would think it's hard for everybody, whether you are grooming yourself and your horse to do the South African Derby, the Hickstead Derby, the Hamburg Derby, the Falsterberg Derby. They have similar types of obstacles. So our bank, for instance, is much kinder than the Hamburg one. The Hamburg one, there's a little vertical on top, only about a meter, but it's one stride from the edge of the bank. So the horse has to jump, come to immediate halt, but have enough momentum to slither down, and then only has one stride at the bottom. Our bank, it has the same sort of gentle slope up, but no jump on top. The slither down, maybe a little further than the Hamburg one, slightly taller, but on a slope now. When in the old days it used to be vertical and you had to be careful the horse didn't jump off. And we have two strides to plank, which is definitely a lot more friendly. And you can see from the fact that 20 years ago, I would say the bank and plank in the South African Derby were the most faulted obstacles for sure. And these days, we don't have that many faults, and that because a lot of riders have built the bank and the plank at home, and they start practicing early. So it's not as much a surprise to them. Everybody who's serious about the Derby works on their fitness, their horse's fitness, and either goes to different venues that can offer those facilities, or has built their very own training obstacles at home to simulate the Derby practice, so that it doesn't come as a shock. But I would think that whatever country you're in, the challenges will be the same.
It's funny because last year when we were interviewing them, and in fact even earlier on this year when we were interviewing them for our promotional videos, every rider that you speak to is a little bit of fear of the bank. Doesn't matter how many times you've done it. Nobody's ever laissez-faire or blasé about the bank. There's a lot of respect for the bank.
Well, I must tell you that as somebody who's not very keen on heights, personally, I never take my own horses down the bank first. I get my partner or a friend who's a good rider to do it, because I'm scared of the heights. And when you're sitting on a 17-hand horse and the bank is 3 meters down, it's quite a long way. And Gonda gave me a great tip before my first ever Derby. She said, Anne-Marie, do not look down the bank. Fix your eye on the top of the plank and ride forward, and the bank will come. And I've always passed that advice on to everybody that I've helped. Don't look down to the bottom of the bank. Keep your eye on what the next jump is, and then you're okay. And as I say, in the actual event, it's gone good.
Definitely words to live by, I think, for anybody facing that very, very tall bank. I just want to remind everybody that if you do have questions, please do drop them into the Q&A. We will be picking them up throughout this talk and at the end. So, Stefan, at Shongweni Festival, when you came out, you were here recently, and you built at that course. There was some tricky striding. And you and I had a conversation around the striding around there. At Hamburg this year, there was not one clear round in the Hamburg Derby. The jump off was between the 4 falters. So these kinds of things will often lead the riders to believe that the courses are being built to trip them up, so to speak. What are your thoughts on that? Are courses being designed and built to get faults, to be super hard? Are they just challenging courses? Marie, what are your thoughts on that?
Jonathan, sorry, Stefan. Jonathan was, I think, a little disappointed last year that there was no jump off. But the ideal result for a Derby is 1 clear round, no jump off. It's enough of a challenge to finish that whole course with the test. Whereas other competitions, jump offs are very important. The speed factor, the going against the clock, the excitement, and most derbies, Spruce Meadows, Blood Ball, South African Derby, there is not always a jump off. There is not always a clear. I think at Spruce Meadows, they published recently the number of clears they'd had in X years, and it was not that many. So I think the goal is not quite the same in a Derby track as it is in a championship course. In a championship course designer would probably like a minimum of 3, but up to sort of 6 clear rounds to go against the clock in a big class. In the Derby, I'm a little disappointed when they're 3 going into the jump off. And we've also here had derbies won with jump offs between 8 falters or whatever, as well. It's because it is long,
we have.
and the course is strong.
Stefan, your thoughts on that?
Well, a derby is a very special class. It can end with one, maybe with 1 clear, but you always have only a few riders who will go maybe to the jump off. In a Grand Prix competition, you have maybe 8-10 riders coming to the jump off, but this is the sense of the class, because it's also you want to have a jump off, and you would like to have riders who go fast in the jump off. It's also good for the spectators, and I think then we are going to see also fantastic sport in a big Grand Prix, maybe like Aachen or any other one of the top Grand Prix. Yeah, it can also be it is also possible that you have only maybe 1 clear round at the end. And when I'm coming back to a derby, a derby is a very special class with special obstacles, and sorry, and here it can also be that we only see a very few clear rounds or even no clear rounds.
So, Marie, this is your last year building, I believe, the derby for the South African derby.
In the cycle, and I don't know whether
in the cycle, yes.
by the time the cycle comes around again. I did a cycle several years ago, and normally what the tradition in South Africa is that a course designer builds for 3 years in a row, and then somebody takes over. And I think the psychology behind that is to give the course designer, although constructing the actual derby course itself is not something new, because we all know what it is. It's to give the course designer some experience and feel about the derby. And at Hamburg, Frank Rottenberger, I was interested to see, he said the 2 qualifying tracks are identical every year. And they're the same tracks. So for us, that's not so. In other words, the course designer does his own qualifying tracks, and our mini derby, which is 1 level below, and our micro derby, the course designer can do whatever he wants with those. And there is some skill and finesse in deciding where to put the tricky obstacles, where to give the riders a breather, where to sight them. And of course, also with the obstacles, some of them being fixed on the approach and the landing, one has to watch the weather forecast very carefully, because there's only 1 road through the dike, 1 road across the water, the steps, the road crossing the bank. So if there's a lot of rain, you have to really save some of the areas and still give the horses an opportunity to have some mileage around the arena and train some of the jumps. So that's where there's a bit of skill and finesse, I think.
So will you be jumping next year?
Unless somebody wants to give me a fantastic horse to ride. I don't have a horse at that level. I would love to. And it was the reason that actually, I mean, I think it was my turn anyway, but it sort of worked out that the horse that I more recently won the Derby on Oregon retired about 18 months ago, and he hadn't jumped in the big classes since COVID. He was getting on a bit. And yeah, at the moment I'm producing a couple of horses that are in the 130 division. So not quite there yet. Who can say whether I'll ride another Derby? I'm getting on along in the tooth as well.
No such thing. So we had a question from Lynn. She wants to know if you will be building a bogey jump this year, and if so, what can we expect?
Is that for me?
That is for you. That is from Lynn.
Okay. Well, I try never to build a bogey fence. When there's one jump on the course that causes a too high a percentage of penalties, it's not great. Ideally, the penalties should be spread around the course. So for instance, as Stefan referred earlier to the bank at Hamburg being the big thing, I think the year I looked, there were something like 31 starters and 23 of them had penalties at the bank. So each year when I've been involved, my assistant, we mark the size, the width of the fence, the locations, the distances, and we mark exactly how many penalties are incurred at each fence, and try and use that as a little bit of a reminder, having looked at what the strength of your field is for the next year's derby, as to exactly where to pitch that fence, which weight of poles to choose, sometimes which depth of cups, where to situate the fence, whether one must make the distance absolutely level or a little longer or a little shorter, use those things. But the goal is not to have a bogey fence.
Okay, so tell me, Stefan, I think I'm going to move this question to you. If you designed the derby today, bearing in mind it obviously hasn't changed for absolute decades, what would it look like?
Well, I have to say I haven't seen the South African derby build up, and it would be good to see it before, and then I could answer this question. Yes, every course designer, I don't know. Anne-Marie said, okay, in the South African derby there are changes possible, but you have to see first what was offered before, and when you see what was offered before, what people were used to ride, then you can make your own decisions and adaptations to a course like that.
Okay, we're going to get you one day to build your ideal derby course. And Marie, if you had to redesign the derby course for South Africa specifically and make it your ideal course, what jumps would you include into that?
Are we saying it has to be in the same arena? Because for me, I think one of the challenges in the Bob Charter arena, as I said before, is that it's actually a flat lower level and a flat upper level with a slope in between and some steps. And I think a true derby should be on a slightly more slopey arena. That adds a big element of difficulty. In the current derby track, I like the tradition of it. I think the tests are balanced and challenging. There's one thing I don't like very much in this track that we didn't have at Inanda, and that is after you jump the balustrade at number 6, where you land on a downhill, because the time can be reasonably tight, you have to really pull your horse's head off to make a 3/4 of a circle back to the road crossing. And for me, in the perfect derby, I'd have them jumping the balustrade, going down onto another fence on the bottom level, and then looping, jumping something and going back to the top. I think it would have made the track smoother. But that's part of what we have. And I think Alan Stacey, who designed this track, wanted to keep the fences more or less in the same order as they were at Inanda. And this is how he achieved it. I don't think I would have other types of obstacles. Yes, we could have an Irish bank, but I think we have got banks going up. We have got a bank going down. I think our Devil's Dyke has become possibly a little too easy. So when I started my second cycle 3 years ago, originally, the old dikes were much deeper and steeper. And there was a devil in the dike. When we modernized our dike and made it a lot softer and more shallow, and we took the ditch out the bottom, Gail Foxcroft said, "Why have they taken the devil out of the dike?" So I decided to I thought, well, let's put the devil back in the dike, and we dug a ditch at the bottom, full of sand. And some of the years I've put a water tray in that. Some of the years I've left the sandbox. That depends on the level, the standard, the weather. etc. But definitely, if you look at the Hickstead Derby, which is on 1 and 1 stride and quite slopey, quite steep and built in rustic, in a little bit of a shady spot, I think that's more difficult than our dike. So
Yeah.
the element of difficulty maybe at the dike.
So one of the questions that we've had is that the question, I'm going to actually read it off here. I've heard that you can jump the stile clear and have 4 poles down immediately afterwards. What do you attribute this to?
Well, let me just say that if you look at the results, you will notice that most, and the course, you will see that most of the actual derby type obstacles are in the first part of the course. By the time you exit the dike, which I have a feeling is number 12, 11 or 12, somewhere around there, as Stefan said earlier, the riders and horses have completed the equivalent of a normal track. They often are both tiring and losing their focus. The stile is a big fence. And after that, I think horses and riders get tired and lose their focus. People have to have good big match temperament and quite a lot of self-discipline to keep it together. And the water jump in Hamburg, I think, is number 4. For us, the water jump is fence 14. It's right
Quite a lot
at
later, yeah.
So a horse that is not an excellent water jumper is very likely to have a foot in the water in our derby. A horse that, that tires a bit. You need a really careful water jumper to clear our water in the derby. And I think that is it. I think it's the faults that come afterwards are lack of focus and tiredness. It's not the scariness of the derby obstacles.
So I've also had a few people ask me to just ask if you could just clarify, please, the difference between an Irish bank and our bank.
An Irish bank is where it's like a hump in the ground. So you jump up a bit, it's slightly sloping, not vertical, and then it has a bit across the top. Stefan, I don't know if you can clarify how wide that is, but the horses mustn't try and jump over the whole thing. It's too wide. They need to put their feet down on the top. And then there's the same slope down. There can either be one of those, which is at Hickstead, or at Hamburg, they've got these 2 sort of, let's call them humpy jumps on either side of the entrance to the arena where the horses come. So it almost creates a lane where the horses enter the arena. And then when they're in the derby, the fence number 3 is the 2 Irish banks. So they jump up probably about 1.10 meters, not a very big amount. They sort of scramble across the top, immediately down, back to ground level, and not a nice fixed level amount of steps, but it's around 2 strides, 2 or 3, and then they go up and down again. And there isn't I don't think there's a pole there, Stefan, in Hamburg. At Hickstead, they have a pole, I think.
When you at the takeoff side of
Yes.
of number 3, there is a pole, and I think also at the takeoff side from the second or from the D part, not from the takeoff, but from takeoff from the Irish bank down, there is a pole.
Okay. So
you're right. It's about 1.10 meters.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And
it's not a downward sliding bank, Philippa. It's a sort of up and down number.
Okay.
So they
jump
on, they jump on the bank and they jump off the bank. Then they jump on the bank again and off the bank.
At Hickstead, they only have one of those. Yes, Hamburg, they have 2, and we don't have it at all.
Yeah, and this is
all right.
This is numbered as a 3 A, B, C, D, so it's counting as a combination.
Okay. All right, Carolyn, there we go. I think we've got your answer for you. So, all right, we're going to move a little bit away from the derby into sort of more general course talk. Stefan, you shared an image with us. I'm going to share that with everyone. So we wanted to talk a little bit about different famous courses of history as well as courses of the future. So this image here, I'm going to share it now as soon as I've worked out my screen. There we go. All right. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
All right. So not the right one.
That's the Hamburg Derby. And I think people might like to see that, Philippa. It's a very interesting track,
Okay.
Hamburg Derby.
Yes.
I think Stefan.
All right. So
around it, it's an interesting
there we
track,
go.
sort of up and down. Now we're looking at United Aviation Group.
Sorry, we're having a moment. We're having a screen share moment. Give me 1 second. I'm taking you back now. Okay, there we go. You should be on it now.
Yes.
All right. All right, Stefan, if you can just, if you want to just talk us through this.
Well, yes. When we have a look, we can see, first of all, that the line from this course is going up and down. This was also a little bit how courses were designed at this at this time in the 1920s, and distances were not so important. It was not technical like what we have today, that we use whatever 4, 5, 6, 7 strides. The fences were more placed in one line, and this you can also see the 1, the 10, the 5, the 15, the 11 is one line. The 6 is the big bank, and the 14 is the devil's dyke. And then you have the second line with number 2, 8, 13, 17, number 9, and the other fence, number 16 and and number 12. This was also a kind of the style at these times. Usually we want to have a lot of movement in a let's say in one of our standard courses, but here we can see we are riding up and down, and so there are no big or not many changes of rein. So we start with number 1, which is going on the right, to number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, then the big bank 6 ABC at the top right, to number 7, which is the big plank after the bank. Then we come number 8 and to number 9, and from number 8, from number 1 to number 9, we have always been now on the right rein. So now we go to number 10, and then we change to the left. And from number 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, A and B, and number 17, we stay on the left rein. So only one change of rein. Today, if you build a course like that, the riders would ask you if you had no better ideas or if you had a bad night, because this is, let's say, at the end, when you put only one change of rein in a, let's say, a modern course, that would be quite boring for them to ride. But at this time, courses were designed like that, and still it's a very interesting track.
Can I just add, just as something I noticed that was interesting, was that in the Devil's Dyke, which you can see is one stride and one stride, the B element, the ditch, had no jump. It was just the ditch. So you jumped into the dike, jumped the open water ditch with no fence. We have a fence there, and out. And likewise, the open water, which is going away from the entrance gate and early in the course, has no takeoff element. It's just plain water. Also, that on the quite tight one stride at the bottom of the big bank, the fence number 7 is 160 high. A lot of our fences are certainly as big as this, some of them earlier on much even bigger, but here the plank at 160 after you've come down that steep thing, ours is normally set at 150. I hope that's not giving me a bad idea for this year, that maybe I should put the plank up. We didn't have too many knocks last year there. Maybe it's time to go up a hole. Well, I'll think on it.
There's your answer, Lynn, to your earlier question about the bogey fence. Eh?
There is one more thing. What we also are not going to see so often in our courses are these flags. You have you see 4 times flags like that in the course. That means the riders have to go around these flags, not to shorten the track. So this also helps to get.
We've got stuck there.
I think we've lost Stefan a second. I think he'll join back now.
This kind of turning points we don't have in our, let's say, modern courses.
And the other thing, Stefan, isn't that because we also have, you'll see at fence number 16, going downhill, the 2 verticals with the ditch, the water ditch behind and in front, the distance in between is 13.2 meters. In the current FEI rules, the maximum distance of a combination is 12 meters. And on 13.2, the year I was in the arena, it actually rode fine. I think because it's at the end of the arena, the horses are longer striding and it's going downhill. 13.2 meters was not a struggle for them. And it's beyond the normal scope of combination distance. Normally minimum distance for a combination is 7 meters and maximum 12. This goes outside of that.
It goes outside of that.
They never had those rules back in the 1920s.
Yeah, no, that's right. But it's still according to the rules, because with the let's say natural obstacles or permanent obstacles, the distances can vary a bit. So still these 13-meter 20s are covered. It's also interesting to have number 12 AB, which is just underneath, which is only written here as 7.60 m, so a very short stride. So these horses, there must be a lot of flexibility in these horses to do, let's say, these longer strides, but also to nation. But at this time, when it was built, 7.60 m was a very normal distance. Today, we would probably do it longer.
So we've spoken quite a lot about the history of this. I'm going to ask you before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you, what do you guys think that riders can look forward to coming in the future? Are there any big changes coming? What does the future hold for course design?
Stefan, are you there? I think Stefan's really
he's really struggling there with his
Europe to answer this question well.
I know.
You were just I couldn't hear you the question, Philippa. It was
sorry. My question was so we've obviously looked back quite a lot. Looking forward, what can riders look forward to? What is the future of course building, course design? What can we look forward to as riders?
Well, if you have a look to the past, let's say World Championships in Tryon or in Herning, for example, we could see that the courses have become longer. We see a lot of good horses, and also in South Africa there are a good number of good horses, and also a good number of top riders who can easily compete at any other show worldwide. And So also the course design is going to adapt. And for example, we see longer courses. We see courses with 40 numbers. We see maybe out of the wide range of combinations we do have, maybe we are using more difficult combinations where we said before, maybe we are not going to use that, but now maybe double oxers are coming back. Yeah, so things or tools which we use. We have the FEI regulation now are changed with the time allowed, so that there is one time fault per second, which also gives a lot of impact to the results, which we will see in the future. So there are some things in the pipeline. The cups are getting more shallow. So yeah, there will be some adjustments, and we have to see where this is going to. If some things are just a fashion, or if they are already a trend. And so yeah, I think course design also has to adapt to the actual standards. And when we see that the grounds have improved, the riders are getting more and more professional, yeah, then it will also have influence to the course design.
Thank you. And Marie, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, if you look at how the tracks have changed so much over the years, I mean, in the last 100 years, not only the rules, but the equipment and the tracks, the fences used to be very solid, big poles, deep cups, many poles. These days, color is quite a big influence. I'm sure most people watching were glued to their TVs for the Tokyo Olympics. I noted there that the beautifully designed and decorated poles, hardly any of them didn't have a design on the actual pole, and most of the combinations were built in the same patterned poles but different colors. So A would perhaps be a blue version of the pattern, B perhaps a red, and C a green or something, whereas you know, for many years we've been building the A and the B and the C in the same colored poles. That was completely different with Tokyo. Maybe that will happen more often. As Stefan said, the times have got a lot tighter, and the courses have to be ridden at quite a sharp pace. The fences are often, modern fences are fairly empty. I don't think they can go a lot emptier. Personally, I don't think the poles can go too much lighter or the cups too much shallower without encouraging people to cheat at home. And one doesn't want that to happen. It has to be a fair test for a horse that's careful, but not a horse that's terrified to come near a pole. So perhaps that's where Stefan was saying that some of the modern tracks, the standard is so high that by adding in a couple extra fences and making the course that bit longer, there are, like in the Derby, more opportunities to fault, because the more fences there are in the track, the more mistakes the horse or the rider can make. That is probably, you know, what's happening where the competitions are really strong. If you had 10 fences with only one treble and one double, it's not as many efforts as if they're 14. So perhaps we are looking forward here also to longer courses. Our challenge here is that most of our riders don't have as big strings of horses, and there are far fewer horses. So we have many riders who only have one, possibly two top horses, and they cannot say we're taking one string to this venue and another string to another venue. We have to look after and preserve our horses. And we don't always have so many coming up that we can say it's okay. Next year we'll have another crop of horses. We're riding the same guys year in and same year out.
We have to when we talk about adjusting screws, where when you say what can riders expect, we also have to be very sensitive. We can play with the colors, we can play with optical aspects, with the combinations, with a number of obstacles, the construction related distances, with the dimensions, of course, which is the most obvious. And but we also have to be careful, because if we turn all these, or if we press all these buttons, then suddenly a course is too difficult. If I do a difficult combination plus difficult color plus a difficult or a demanding, let's say it's the better word, demanding distance, then suddenly it's too difficult, and even the professionals will look like amateurs. This is not what we want. We also want to present our sport in a nice and fair way, that horses and riders have a fair chance to go clear. And at the end, we want to find the athlete, not only the athlete in the rider, but also the athlete in the horse. And I think this is, if we try to focus on that, then we are on a good way.
I'm going to close off with my very final question to each of you. Do you have a favorite Derby story, or a favorite Derby fairy tale?
Sure. I don't know about a favorite Derby story or fairy tale. To say, I love Derby, so I always aspired to ride in it. I didn't necessarily aspire to win it. I was jolly pleased that I have managed to win it a couple of times. But I haven't had any terrifying experiences or magical fairy tales. Usually the results that are good are because either I or my students have put in many hours of hard work and spent a lot of time getting the horse to actually enjoy the Derby jumps, to trust the rider, and that both are going to come out the other end feeling confident and like they've made a success of it.
Thank you. Stefan?
I think everyone who has crossed ever the finish line in the Derby is a very happy person, because many also didn't come to the end, and so I think it's a very it doesn't matter if you have one pole down, if you're clear round, or if you had any other difficulty in a course. When you come to the end of a Derby course, this is always already a success.
Sorry, Philippa, I just want to say something. I actually don't know why I didn't think of it before. I think it was my first or my second Derby. And there was Jonathan Clark, Evan Anderson, and I, who were riding with Gonda at the time. And we walked the course, and Natas Ferreira, who's retired now, but he was known for building good but strong tracks. He put up the Derby course at Nanda. It was very big. And as we came to number one, the wall, Gonda turned to Judy Lowe, who was walking next to her, and said, "I think this has gone up a hole, Judy." And then we went up the hill to 2. "Oh, yes, this has gone up." And then she looked over her shoulder at us Appies behind and said, "Ride hard." And as we went round the course, every fence, "Ride hard." Well, the first, I think, 8 to 10 horses didn't see the finish. They were in reverse qualification. And I spent most of the morning in the plastic toilets, nipping in and out, because I didn't know how I was going to manage this. And so we got a bit of a funny story. That was it. And I had to reassure myself that my horse was super brave.
Fit enough. You were going to make it.
Fit enough, brave enough. And yes, I might hit every fence, but he wasn't likely to ditch me at any of them. And that was the Derby was won on 8 penalties.
Oh my goodness.
But far from clear, is that, yeah.
Far from clear.
Far from clear.
Well, thank you. I see we've lost Stefan. I think his bandwidth Germany finally took him. Ironic, because we all think we all have terrible bandwidth, but he's sitting in Germany and is struggling. But Anne-Marie, thank you so much. I want to encourage everybody to please go and follow the social media pages. We've got loads of information up there. We've got our beautiful Derby videos, which are on the United Aviation Group YouTube pages, and on the social media pages. They will be on the website. But thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And just a little update from Kyalami Equestrian is that the Derby is actually officially sold out at the moment. All the tickets are sold at the moment, so keep an eye on their pages for additional information. But yes, we look forward to Derby. We will be live streaming, so please do also keep an eye on our pages for that, because should they not be able to release any additional tickets, you will at least be able to watch on our live stream, which will be great. But thank you, and we thank you so much for spending time with us this evening. We're very grateful, and thank you for sharing so much knowledge and so much history with us. It's been great. Really appreciate it. It's
been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Philippa. Jonathan, thank you so much for your support of my favorite show. Hopefully it'll be, as Philippa says, great for everybody, spectators, participants, everybody.
And thank you to everybody for the hard work, and looking forward to a very exciting event.
It's going to be great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for attending.
Cheers, guys. Good night.
Good night.